All right, cool. Well, speaking of bands, does social media make it easier or harder for young bands?
That's a loaded question.
It is, and that's why I love to ask it.
It's a loaded question because social media is the double-edged sword that we've all have experienced on our own special, just on our own ways. Facebook is arguably the best advertising for any business, band being lumped in with all that. It's the best form of all time, in my humble opinion. Yeah. But it's evolving and it's changed to where it's now a pay-to-play format, and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So you have to utilize social media in different ways. You have to understand the trends of social media because they're changing so rapidly. Facebook is more of it's more for older audiences now.
Yeah, true.
For if you get past the shit posting, it's really just a older audience form. All the younger, all age audience is in Instagram and Snapchat now.
Yeah.
So now you have to figure out a way of how do I find the adults and how do I find all the younger people and how do I try to present my product to them both cohesively and in like this timely manner.
Yeah.
So you have to have all this content and you have to be able to provide, something to the table on all these forms and knowing your demographic.
Right.
It's pretty bland words or pretty bland approach, but it's very true.
And then another thing I wanted to point out, I complimented Exiled Martyr when I was interviewing him, is the follow-up. Mm-hmm. If you release a music video, you have to have that big show coming up right after, like a week later or whatever it may be. And if a lot of bands, sometimes they'll release something and then there's just nothing after, and then it's just it loses that flair of that release. So
they become a dud.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Those do happen. Like that's just the thing is that that is the name of the game.
Yeah.
But bands can come back. Like you can always come and swing back harder with some other release. And there's bands that are on a global, form and they don't get to go out on the road because they didn't have a hit single.
Okay. Right.
And that's just how they go about music in their ways. Or bands are just going and doing nonstop touring and they're grinding. Yeah. And that's how they get their name out there through that, reach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, yeah, you're right. It was a double-edged sword. It really is. It's just depending on how you use it.
Yeah, and you have to have the right content, and that might be like, well, what is the right, just content? Be like, well, the right, just content is telling your narrative as a band. Yeah. That's why I tell all my bands of like, we have to be telling a narrative with our presentation. If we don't have that substance, our audience is not going to get emotionally invested in what we're doing. Yeah. And a lot of our audience is on their phone scrolling. That's where the audience is to discover anything. Yeah. So you have to be able to be quick.
Yeah. And I love that shit, man. It really is knowing your audience overall, and that's exactly a good point. Is it has to be eye-catching. It has to be something that hits them, and more importantly, like we were talking about, having motivated people that are able to push it as well. It can't just be one person. It has to be
it definitely
team.
Can. It definitely needs to be. Like there's plenty of companies that have a social media team because one person just may not understand it. So they'll have a team of people that do. Yeah. And those are the best people to push your product.
Yeah. So that's really huge, man. Cool. Well, we're kind of covering that too, but what makes a band memorable, in your opinion?
Memorable? Overall, they have to be the complete package. And, that can mean many things. It doesn't have to mean one specific. It's just like, how are they live? Do they come across as close as they can on the record? If not, they sound just like the record live. Cool. How do they gel as a band? Like, do they look appealing on stage? Whether they have scrims and flashy fog and lights or not, and they're pretty raw, and that's their aesthetic, is bare.
Yeah, it can work for bands, and I like that you kind of point that out. I mean, it's just how you market yourself.
Yeah, right? and does all that vibe, does all that gel to where when you play, I feel a presence in the room when you're there. Yeah. Or are you a band that's just passing by? Are you a band that's going through the motions? Right. Because, we communicate a lot through our body language, not out of our mouths. So the audience are not dumb. Yeah. And they could pick up on a lot of things and be like, oh, that band's going through the motions. That band's frustrated because such and such happened on stage. Yeah. How does that band, keep it together in those moments? Yeah. And even like sometimes I like watching bands that just like, man, they're having a bad night. Okay, cool. Now I want to watch how the band's gonna, keep it together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And to let out that and that's a good point that you make, because that is huge. If the band's not enjoying it, the fans aren't going to enjoy it. Nobody in the crowd is going to enjoy it. So yeah, that's a really good point. With bands, they have to let it all go and just feel the music when they're on stage. And
you can't fake a good time. You know, people know when you're having a genuine good time versus, okay, cool, like he's going through the steps, he's going through the motions. And if you're being just all around just genuine in what you're presenting, that's what makes you memorable.
Yeah, yeah. No, totally, man. That's a really good point on that one. Cool. Your first favorite band?
If we're saying first, as in like the first band like I was buying posters for, got invested in, was all about it, was Korn.
Really? Korn? Oh, I was thinking you were going to say Limp Bizkit, but that's great too, man.
No, I love Limp Bizkit, but it was Korn that started it, of like that trend of like, I was 9, 10, buying Korn posters, buying Life is Peachy because my sister had it and she didn't like it, so she gave it to me. And that's how I discovered a lot of like the cool 90s music was through her, because she was a teenager during the mid 90s.
Right.
So anything that was hip musically or trendy musically, I would always hear it come out of her room. So I would always get the scraps of what she didn't like.
Yeah.
And Korn was one of them. So thank you, sister.
Yeah, right. You know what's funny? The same thing with me. My older brother bought a Crazy Town CD for that Butterfly song. And the rest of the CD is completely different. I don't know if you know that, but I ended up listening to it. I was like, oh, it's just fucking badass. It was like totally new metal and shit like that, but that's really cool. Well, on the same token of that, your current favorite band. And I know that's a really hard question, but...
It's a hard one because it's just like current one that's like out there, like that's more current.
Yeah.
You know, and that isn't, you know, from the mid 90s, early 2000s, that's doing novelty. Hey, this is our last tour, and we've done that for like the last 10 tours. You know, but most current favorite band, it's hard.
Yeah.
It really is hard.
What's like the first thing that comes to mind?
See, like...
There's just so many, right? Yeah, yeah.
There's just so many.
Give us like a top 5 then. What are you currently listening to?
Currently, bands that I'm really listening to is Vane. I love Vane. I like Alpha Wolf. Really like Dealer. They're really been doing some great things. God. Bad Flower, actually, is something that's a little bit off. I'd be like, wait a minute, what? No, listen to Bad Flower.
I was going to say, I'm going to check out all these bands because I haven't heard of one of these bands that you've named yet.
And also, really right now, fucking with that band, Three Teeth, and they were just here a couple nights ago, but they put out this new record. It's very like 9 Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson-y.
Oh, nice.
Really good.
Really good. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I haven't heard of any of those bands, so I'm definitely going to check that out. I always like finding new bands. But that's cool, dude. When you're not juggling all this work stuff, what do you like to get into?
I'm a very avid pro wrestling fan, so I like to watch pro wrestling anytime that I can. That's like my escape. If I can afford it, go out to Disneyland. I'm a really big just Disneyland fan.
Dude, that's awesome. Hell yeah.
Or I like to camp. I like to be recreational. I like to go out and just see the country, like see the world. Any time that I have a reason to go out and just travel, that's what I would prefer to do.
Right. Yeah. That'd be a dream of mine too.
So I like to go out and just camp. I like to be out in the woods and just kind of get away.
Yeah, you guys are kind of doing that the whole tour with I Pray and Exiled, right?
That was fun.
Yeah, man,
that was a lot of fun.
I was paying attention to that, man. That looked really fun. You're basically camping the whole time, right?
Yeah, we only got 2 rooms, and one was in a laid-back Kansas, middle of nowhere town, where we ended up partying out in the parking lot. And then I don't know if it was a person that we invited at the convenience store or someone that worked at this place that we were staying at. But they ended up giving us more beer, and this was like at 4 a.m.
Oh my gosh, dude.
So we were just up until like 6 a.m.
Having to drive somewhere else that day, right?
Yeah. But luckily that was like an entire, just day off. So we drove a good chunk. Cool. So where we were staying at when all this was happening at was, the next day was only like a 5-hour drive.
Oh, okay,
so
okay,
it
that's
wasn't
cool.
that bad. And then the other night was the most sketchiest situation that you can think of. Microwave got set on fire, mosquitoes everywhere.
What?
Pretty sure that there was some interesting things going on a couple rooms down. There was always people coming in and out. There was cars circling in the parking lot, being all kinds of sketch. Arkansas, you're something else, homie. You're something else, Arkansas.
We won't air this in Arkansas, for sure. But dude, that's awesome. Okay, cool. My last couple of questions here for you. An AZ band that you think is currently killing it?
That's a lot, actually, because Arizona's got a huge, deep talent pool right now.
It does, yeah.
So whatever you're about, whatever you're vibing, whatever the case is, I guarantee that there's a band for you in Arizona somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said it before. It's a melting pot.
Oh yeah.
There's so many different kinds of people in Arizona.
So many.
So different kinds of blending genres. So yeah.
Right now, bands that are killing it though, I have to really go with Holy Fawn. They're really setting a good standard barrier in their respective music genre.
Oh yeah.
For metal, I mean, I love all my bands on my roster, but bands they there's
Pariah, yeah.
Pariah, Malnourished is doing some really cool things. What's the other band? Crowning Thieves is doing some really cool things.
You talked about Crowning Thieves with Jerry Bryant.
Dead World Recreation.
Yeah.
There's just so many that are out there that it's hard to cover them all. Yeah. As you can tell through.
There really is, and that's a good point. I mean, I know there's a shitload of bands here, and they're all everywhere. There's all sorts of spectrum going on. So that's a really good point. Whatever you're feeling, you're gonna find a band that's that way, and I'm digging it. Cool. So my last question for you: an AZ band that you feel deserves a little bit more attention.
A little bit more attention. Ooh, sorry about that.
No, I love it.
A little more attention. Well, right now. That's all of them. And that might be a cop-out answer, but it's true. All of them.
Yeah.
Arizona needs to have all the recognition because there's so many bands out here that are doing so many cool things, and they all deserve we need to go out to shows. There needs to be more sold-out local shows.
Yeah. That's cool, man.
It can't just be so far in between. It needs to be a consistent thing because there's so many good bands here that that if we go up together, it's going to be an overall better experience all around for shows, the community, venues, rehearsal studios are going to be popping. If our music scene's really thriving and it's good business, everyone wins.
Yeah, that's exactly what this whole show is about. Is just getting people to go to shows and realize it's fun. It's you're gonna find like-minded people and you're gonna see talented musicians. So that's really cool. That I love that answer, man. That was really, really awesome.
Thank you,
Eric. That's all my time for you, man. I really appreciate you. Hell yeah.
After some White Claws.